Dragon Ballers, if you're looking to buy Dragon Ball Super or One Piece sealed product, make sure to get 5% off using my link to Mystic TCG down in the description. You can also sell cards to them using their Facebook link, which is also down in the description. Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another deck profile. In today's video, I want to share with you guys my list for the Black Supreme Kai of Time aggro deck, featuring the new Zenkai Dash Pack support, which finally, it seems like everyone's locals has pretty much gotten their hands on, and the price of these cards are also just dropping rapidly because locals seem to be getting flooded with them, which is a good thing because, players are going to be able to get their hands on promos without having to spend too much money, which is always a nice thing. But if you're a player that has been dedicated to the color black in the Dragon Ball Super card game and maybe a bit disappointed that the color has not been doing so well as of late, I have really good news for you. This is a super highly competitive deck. It is very strong. This is a build that I've been testing with my teammates, and if I were to play this deck at a tournament coming up, this is pretty much the build I would play. So we're gonna go over that in today's video. If you guys are new here, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell so you never miss a video, and if you guys do want to pick up any of the cards for this deck or any trading cards for that matter, it would greatly help me out if you use my link in the description to TCG Player. I really do appreciate it. My birthday is over the weekend, so if you want to wish me a happy birthday, it would really be awesome if you subscribed. Anyways, let's jump right on into this. We are, of course, starting with 4 copies of our Demigra Momentary Ally. This unison plus the leader just facilitates everything. The leader allows our Overrealms to stick around instead of getting warped at the end of the turn that they're played like normal, and Demigra facilitates our Wormhole. And this guy is honestly a lot stickier than you would expect for multiple reasons. One of which, a lot of times your opponent is going to just ignore this unison and try to go for your leader because the leader has the ability to bring the unison back anyway. I would say if you're playing against this deck, you got to be very careful about doing that, because don't forget that even if you your opponent has the ability to recycle the unison, it's still a good idea to take it off the board if it's not going to take up too much of your turn, because you still want to make them invest the energy and pitch that card to bring the unison back. But if it's going to take like all of your attacks just to go at this unison and not really progress the game state, you might want to avoid doing that. Just a tip for anyone who's maybe playing against this deck. But yeah, this unison is absolutely incredible. Don't think I need to really tell you guys that. Then we have 4 copies of Goten Fusion Renewed. So I have tried builds that play this card and that don't play this card, and to be honest with you, I think that the consistency this card brings to the table is kind of necessary. Besides that, this is an Overrealm 2. You're never really going to play it for that unless you really need to get the cards into the warp to get awakened. But we do have 10 search targets in the deck, not counting the copy of the card itself that you'll use. And we also include Trunks thwarting the Dark Empire within that. Now, this is another card that I don't really like. It's got pretty abysmal stats, but again, it's another thing that's pretty important to getting awakened. So this, 11 card package is pretty much our consistency engine. We need Trunks to get extra cards to the warp when necessary, and sometimes I will combo 5k on this guy's swing just to make him a 15k double strike if my opponent's at like 5 life, so that they have to pitch at least 2 cards not to take it if their super combos aren't online yet. And it also generates my Z energy, and the Z deck is pretty important in this deck. So yeah, I don't love the guy's stats. I wish I can cut them all together, and honestly, if I wanted to play the most consistent version of this deck, you'd play 4 Trunks thwarting the Dark Empire. But again, he's so bad later in the game that I just want to try to get away with 3 and hopefully just find him when I need him off of Goten Fusion Renewed. The nice thing about Goten, though, is that he can also put cards in the drop, basically putting himself in the drop via his discard effect, which is another way to fuel your Overrealm as well as get more cards in the warp to get awakened, because we do want to aim to awaken by turn 2 in this deck the majority of the time, and that is pretty consistent. This is a clean 50 card build, so yeah, I don't really want to add too much more to it. And even though it is a mill deck, I don't really experience decking out like ever, because you only really mill on your on awakened side. At least you only mill a lot on your awakened side. So once you're awakened, you're recycling a lot of cards from your warp back into your drop, maybe milling 1 per turn with Demigra, but besides that, milling out in my experience has not been too big of a problem. Then we have 4 copies of Trunks Time Regulator. Probably just the best 3-cost Overrealm you could play in any deck, but in this deck it's extra good because it facilitates Goten challenging the Dark Empire, one of the new cards specifically for Supreme Kai of Time. This card is just so cracked. It's basically an unlimited version of Gogeta thwarting the Dark Empire. The only thing it doesn't do is kill a battle card on swing, but it makes up for that by drawing a card if you play it from your hand. You can also play it from your warp, of course, by paying 1 black if you have a Trunks Xeno in play, which is another reason why we want to play Trunks Time Regulator. But of course, we can't forget the new pair of cards that came out, and half that pair is Trunks challenging the Dark Empire. These 2 cards alone just give this deck such a boost that they make it such a threatening aggro beast. And what you really want to watch out for, though, is the way you sequence your turn 2, because it can become very important to where you're probably going to play a Trunks Challenge the Dark Empire on turn 2 if you can help it. But remember, he combos cards from your warp, and you need 8 cards in your warp to get awakened with this leader. So you really got to make sure you sequence it correctly to where you either awaken before swinging with Trunks, or you know, make sure that you have the appropriate amount of cards in your warp before you start swinging with Trunks on your unawakened side. And it's really all about sequencing this deck, because you want to make sure you can get your Overrealms twice per turn. And if you're trying to Overrealm 6 costs per turn, 2 of them per turn, that's very, very doable. But again, it just requires a proper sequencing. So this is a deck that you honestly do have to practice. You can't just like pick it up and play. You got to get the sequencing down, but once you do, it can be very, very rewarding. Then we have 4 copies of Goku Reflexive Strike. This card's incredible for so many reasons, man. It's got way too much text to be a bad card. First of all, it's an Overrealm 3, and it's not really a threatening Overrealm, but it does offer you some filter through your deck if you choose to Overrealm it. I've done that plenty of times to make sure I can get awakened. He also puts himself in the warp, as well as another card from your hand, so he's another way to get more cards in your warp to get awakened. But also, you pitch him, you search for Gokus and Vegetas, of which I'll show you the targets I play in a minute. And he's also got the counter, which is great against your blue and yellow decks that want to play those big time negates, maybe try to stop your turn. For 3 energy, this guy shuts that down, and then you can use his filter effect after that, which is just so good. Then we have 4 copies of our Vegeta super combo, just best super combo you can play in a black deck pretty much, and it's also helpful that Reflexive Strike searches it out. We've got 4 copies of Goku Beyond All Limits. Again, just another one of the best Overrealms that the game has shown us, like ever. Any black Overrealm deck has pretty much played 3 to 4 copies of this card, and it's so good for recycling anything we want. Trunks Challenge the Dark Empire, Goten if we want to play it and draw a card from our hand, and then other targets we'll see throughout the deck. And when your leader allows this card to stick around instead of getting warped, it's just even more insane. Then I'm trying out this card. This is 2 copies of SS4 Goku Thwarting the Dark Empire. So in theory, this card's really good against decks that have a hard time removing it. And, you know, there's so much removal in Dragon Ball Super nowadays that you'd think that there's no deck that'll have a hard time removing this. But against your red decks, against like your early game or your early game against blue decks, they'll have somewhat of a difficult time removing this card. And if you can stick it, you'll get multiple draws across multiple turns, which is a really good value engine. Again, thanks to your leader letting this card stick around for multiple turns. I'm only trying it at 2 because, I don't know, the times I have played it, it has been pretty impressive, but I don't know if it's like super applicable in every matchup. But if I do find this card just overperforms more and more, I may go up to 3, maybe 4 copies. But yeah, this is a card to keep your eye on. So try it out, see how you like it. Let me know in the comments if you end up trying it out. Then we have, of course, our 1 copy of Gogeta Thwarting the Dark Empire. We're not really playing any 30k fusions as far as Vegeta is concerned, but that's perfectly fine. With Reflexive Strike and the Vegeta Super Combo and a 50 card deck, getting those cards into the warp is rather consistent, but it's also perfectly fine to Overrealm this guy because, again, your leader allows him to stick around, so that's not really a big deal at all. Then we have 1 copy of Dark Broly Heartless Berserker. Honestly, I'd like to play 2 copies of it, but again, 50 cards, don't want to go past that. But also, the 0 combo power makes me a little bit hesitant on playing more than 1. It's still super clutch for some free removal, and in this deck, you can, of course, play it from your warp if you mill it early or Overrealm it earlier and want to replay it later. Those are super valid options. Then we have 2 copies of Mass Saiyan Belligerent Warrior. This is a card that I would honestly like to bump up to possibly 4, and maybe if I make the decision to just cut Thwarting the Dark Empire Trunks altogether, maybe I'll do that, because this card on turn 1 is really nice going second. It's 20k crit, it's a sticky body, it's a 7-drop, so some decks have a hard time removing that so early in the game. And he is just really nice removal against Z cards and SCRs, because even though he normally just offers temporary removal, those cards can't come back to the board after they've left the board, so he is nice for that regard. But yeah, I do like the 1-drop 20k crit on turn 1. That has been pretty nice, so I might try to fit more of these in the deck as I test with it more. Then we have 3 copies of Bardock the Tenacious, and this pretty much starts up our defensive line. The one awkward thing about this card is that he is not a Bardock Xeno, which is actually relevant for our Z deck, so keep that in mind. The rest of everything else, besides Dark Broly and this Mass Saiyan, are Xenos, which is important for later, but yeah, just keep that in mind. Unfortunately, this is not a Bardock Xeno. Then we have 3 copies of Support of the Dark Empire. We have 2 copies of Petrification. You can definitely swap the ratios of any of these things. Petrification is really good against things like Gohan Beast SCR, for example. So if you're having a hard time against Crimson, maybe go up to a 3rd Petrification, maybe chop 1 Support of the Dark Empire, or you can even chop a Bardock the Tenacious, but he has combo power, which is always really nice. You want to consider that when you're thinking about adding more extra cards to your deck. And then finally, we have the Cumber FCR. If there weren't enough reasons to play this deck, Cumber is the 14,000th reason to play this deck because this card is just so good. Mill it in a black deck and you can still play it. That's been a problem for black decks for so long, is that if they mill their FCR, they just lose it typically, and this card does not have that problem. Incredible, incredible card. Then we go down to the Z deck. We have our 3 copies of Pan Search for Another World. So this is what I was talking about with Bardock not being a Xeno. He does not count towards your activate main Bond 3, but this is great for removal, just really nice. And the 1-drop 15k stat, good for aggro, and then this replaces your life when you crit your life in order to keep your Overrealms around for the rest of the game. 2 copies of Majin Buu Pure Destroyer. Every single black deck should play this card, so make sure you get your hands on it. Even if you're not planning on playing Supreme Kai of Time, this card's insane. It's a 1-cost blocker, it's removal, it's 25k beat stick. The Agent Destruction effect does not matter unless you're playing that deck specifically. This card is so insane. 1 copy of Vegeta Surmounting the Impossible. You're going to get into some weird loops where you have Pan on board and you're rejuvenating your life, but you kind of want to get down to 4 life because you want to be able to activate your super combos. So in those types of scenarios, you might use your Vegeta Surmounting the Impossible to like bring yourself down to 4 without necessarily critting a life. That might be something you do, but yeah, it's always just a solid card to have in the Z deck. Can't really complain too much about it. And then 1 copy of Demon God Demigod Begrudging Ally. Honestly, I never really play it that often at all, but it is a card that works with Overrealm based decks, and you might come across situations where this card might be valuable. So I don't think there's really another card that needs to be the 7th slot of this deck, except for maybe like a 3rd Boo, but I don't know. I think 2 has been perfectly fine for me. But this could definitely be a 3rd Boo if you wanted to go that route. But anyways, guys, that is my Supreme Kai of Time build with some little tips and tricks on how to play it. If you have any questions, please do drop them down in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.